Hi friends, it's good to see you. It's a beautiful day in the Lord today, it really is. I wanted to come to you today, guys, and I wanted to share something with you. It hasn't been that long ago, maybe about a month and a half, maybe 2 months. I saw an advertisement on the computer for a book. I really like books. I mean, you can see I love books. Anyway, so I found this book and I ordered it. It was a very, very old book. It was only like $1.80, okay, very cheap. And this book was about some people who had gone through an earthquake and a tidal wave in Italy. This book is called Italy's Great Horror of Earthquake and Tidal Wave. See, it's a very old book. But as I was reading it, I was just like, really, I was so shocked and surprised because the words that were written in this book, guys, it sounded to me like the tribulation, how in my mind I expect the tribulation to be. I know I'm a Christian and I'll be gone in the rapture during that time, but this, my mind still wanders. Doesn't our mind still wonder about things? Being just human, we wonder what's going to go on, and there's nowhere that talks about what the tribulation will be like. So when I read this, I'm like, wow, that in my mind sounds like what I imagine it to be. I wanted to share it with you guys. It's not that it's something fun. It's not. It's terrible. These people suffered, and these people hurt, and these people, there were so many deaths, and it was tragic, and they went through so much, and just frightening, scary, just really horrible. Nevertheless, reading these things, and in my mind, seeing what they went through tells me what they're going to be going through in the tribulation. That led me a little bit, if it's even possible, that led me to want to share the word with others and to, how can I say it, bring them into the ark while there's still time. And then you say, no, it's not right to scare people to Jesus. Well, we shouldn't have to. But, you know, if that's all that there is to tell them, if they won't believe unless they see what the outcome of everything will be, it'll be this tribulation that in the end will lead to hell if they don't accept the Lord Jesus Christ. We have to tell them in whatever way that the Lord is showing us. Anyway, let me share with you from this book some of it, what I saw. There's quite a bit, probably about a half an hour's worth, but you know what? I'll end up probably making 2 videos for you just to cut it up in half so you can stop, take a break after the first 15, 20 maybe. And then I want to do this for you. I want you to see, and I think you're going to agree with me that this sounds like the tribulation in my mind, and I think your mind's pretty much the same. Okay, friends, and here we go. The city slept. In massive palaces and humble hovels alike, women and children lay wrapped in a slumber from which they were so soon to start in terror, only to be plunged anew into that sleep that knows no waking. All nature seemed at peace and at rest. Suddenly out of the skies came a sinister hiss that caused the very priests at the altar to halt in their sacred offices. Heads bowed in prayer were raised as the hiss deepened into an unearthly shriek. Guys, this is going on at about a little bit past 5 o'clock in the morning, getting towards 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay. The kneeling worshippers leaped to their feet for one brief instant, and then slowly and reverently, but with an added touch of terror, again sank to their knees and began to touch their beads. The heavens thundered as from the bursting of 10,000 bombs. The hiss deepened till it seemed that a myriad of red-hot serpents were writhing in the waters. Then came the whirl, the rush and roar of a torrential rain. so terrifying that not a face but blanched with apprehension. Only those who have faced an electrical storm in the tropics can imagine 1/100th part of the horror of that supernatural demonstration. It lasted but an instant, but in that brief span, scores of thousands perished neath the ruins of the stricken city. The first crash from the heavens reached every ear. The houses had begun to vomit terror-stricken men, women, and children before even the fantastic dance of earth began. Thousands gained the open streets before the final crash came. Walls fell to the right of them, roofs crashed to the left of them, chimneys toppled before them, while death stalked in their wake to destroy any who hesitated or paused. Other countless thousands were too late, or were held prisoners of jammed doors and fallen stairways. Walls shivered, gaped, and fell, carrying down to death all who still clung with convulsive fear to their racked and ruined homes. Even all those who had sought safety in the streets did not escape. The fleeing hordes who, maddened by the terror of that awful moment, had sought safety in flight. Dies irae, the day of wrath, screamed 1,000 throats. The great gas tanks at the northern end of town had blown up. The prison collapsed and buried 400 prisoners, while 30 or more made their escape. Yet from all this wild carnival of death, thousands escaped to the inner shore of the harbor in a frantic endeavor to escape the hail of bricks and mortar that were still raining death at every tremor upon the refugees. Vain delusion. The story of slaughter was not yet half told. There in the open places, in the rain, bleeding from their wounds, nursing their hurts, the refugees huddled, praying for the coming of the day. Numbed with the horror of the situation, some mumbled prayers, while others, crazed by the shock and the loss of loved ones, danced and sang. The scene was unparalleled in all human experience. The Santelia barracks were destroyed, with most of the soldiers, most of the troops in them, only 30 soldiers escaping out of 230. In the growing brightness of the dawn, they saw what yet was hidden from those lower down along the water's edge. Rearing its head 50 feet in the air, a giant wave was racing from the shore. They did not know, could not know, that already this same wave, first sweeping to the eastward, had engulfed a city of 50,000 people 8 miles to the southeast. It was returning to wreak a further vengeance. In an instant there was a wild rush for safety, back across those hideous piles of ruins, while the groans of the injured, helplessly pinioned beneath beam and brick, added to the horror. None then thought of succoring the injured. Self-preservation is nature's first law, and self-preservation was possible only by flight. It seemed but a moment before the hissing wave, speeding along with the fleetness of a racehorse, was upon them. Hundreds of half-dressed men, women, and children who had fled from their houses to the streets were caught in the onrush of waters and drowned or injured. In a moment it had receded, carrying with it many of its unhappy victims, while the bodies of hundreds of others strewed the strand. Flames then began making their way slowly over the devastated area in an inexorable advance. Imprisoned and pinioned human beings, unable to extricate themselves, burned alive. Hundreds were dying of their injuries. All the water pipes, sewers, and gas pipes of the city had been destroyed, and water and filth were flooding the torn streets. Gas explosions occurred frequently and resulted in scores of small fires. All the hospitals in Catania were crowded, and even the schools were converted into infirmaries. Refugees telling of their escape relate that escaping from their ruined houses, they waited in terror for the coming of light. Then they made their way over the obstructions in the streets to the open places. They had to leave behind them, under the ruins, countless victims who called for help in heart-rending tones. It is asserted that probably half of the fatalities occurred because it was impossible for the survivors to render prompt assistance. The waters were covered with the floating bodies of men and animals and all kinds of wreckage. Crowds of nude persons walked the streets with images of saints. They all appeared demented. Scenes of the weirdest nature were being enacted. Clouds of crows and buzzards descended on the stricken district, having crossed the sea in response to some mysterious intuition of the disaster. The roads were filled with long, sad processions of wounded refugees. They all believed that they were the only survivors. The disaster exceeds all efforts of imagination, and the havoc is so vast and universal, I scarcely know how to begin to describe it. The horror of it all is, indeed, beyond words. When I enter the ruined area from Catania, I find myself a prey to indescribable emotions. The spectacle that greets the eye here is beyond the imagination. It was 5 o'clock in the evening and already dark, and rain was falling. We first saw a homeless family sitting on a heap of stones. They were half naked and huddled together under a single umbrella. We asked them to come with us and be relieved, but they refused, saying they preferred to die on the ruins of their home. Most of the refugees were practically naked, some in tattered garments picked up in the streets. A cobbler relates that immediately after the first shock, he and his wife and children rushed out into the street. Fires were breaking out all around them. It took his party hours to traverse the heaps of ruins between his house and the waterfront. After placing his family in safety, he returned to seek his mother and sisters, but he was obliged to give up the efforts. It was impossible to make his way back to his home. He says that no help arrived for 30 hours after the catastrophe. An old man who had lost his family was seen going about the ruins vainly asking for food. He had loaded himself down with his most valuable possessions. While on one of the docks, he suddenly called out, "As nobody helps me, I will die." And with those words, he threw himself into the sea. A sailor dragged him out. An outburst of frightful cries was heard from the shore. A crowd of maddened persons of every age broke into the custom house. Some were naked, others half clothed, and they all were mud-spattered and half demented. Many were injured and bleeding. They sacked everything that came to their hands, seeking food, drink, and clothing. Bands of famished individuals were groping among the debris in the hope of discovering food. The first of the searchers who were successful were attacked by others with revolvers and knives, and were obliged to defend their finds literally with their lives. The struggle was fierce. The famished men threw themselves upon each other like wolves, and several left disemboweled in defending a handful of dry beans or a few ounces of flour. Revolver shots rang out over the horrible din and confusion. Finally, tongues of flame shot up in the darkness, showing that fire was completing the work of the destruction. Fire was completing the destructive beginnings of the earthquake. Ghoul-like figures flittered in the semi-darkness, risking their lives among tottering ruins, not to assist the agonized sufferers, but in fiendish strivings to profit by the appalling disaster. They were robbing the dead and dying. All of the survivors speak of the misery suffered by cold and hunger after their escape. and of the dense choking cloud of dust which hung over the city for a long time, obscuring their vision and adding to the horrors of their bewilderment, and of the greater horrors of the succeeding earthquake shocks, especially in the darkness which seemed to forbid all hope of final escape. They could only cry for help, and heard no answer, save other cries for help from the darkness around them. As each day goes by, the disaster appears more horrible, terrifying, and immense. It is without precedent in the history of the world. The tremblings of the earth continue with sinister rumblings, and at times boiling water surges from the crevasses. The sources of the streams are poisoned with putrid matter. Dogs and swine, enraged by hunger, sprung upon the wounded and devoured them. Insatiable fire and uncontrolled famine will inexorably claim their victims. The government hastily sent an Army Corps commander to take full charge of the troops in the devastated territory. One of his first measures was to declare martial law. Vandalism of the worst kind had broken out, and the government adopted the most energetic and most severe measures for its repression. Robbers and looters were shot on sight. As before narrated, the prison collapsed. Some of the prisoners were killed, but the survivors made their escape and joined the hooligans who were sacking the city. The robbers pillaged the ruins of shattered buildings and even stole clothing and valuables from the corpses of the victims. They were not deterred by the flames that broke out in several sections of the city, but took advantage of the light for their vandalism. The night was of one horror indescribable: fire, robbery, dead and dying on every side. The city in the utmost confusion, and the people were panic-stricken and under a spell of terror. Guys, I'm going to stop this one right now. We're just after 17 minutes, and then I'll come back and then I'll finish this up. I love you.